The old house on Whisperwood Lane had always held its secrets, cloaked in the kind of silence that suggests more than just an absence of sound. For years, folks in the quiet, unassuming town of Havenwood simply thought it was empty, a relic of a bygone era, perhaps a touch too grand for a town that prided itself on its simplicity. But for Elias Thorne, a man whose life had until recently been as predictable as the sunrise, Whisperwood Lane was about to become the epicenter of an unraveling. He was a creature of habit, a historian by trade, meticulously cataloging the past, never imagining that his own future would be hijacked by a phantom from the grave. Elias had spent his days sifting through dusty archives, finding comfort in the tangible facts of history, in the certainty of what had already transpired. He valued order, logic, and the clear distinction between life and death. And then the obituary arrived. It wasn't a digital notification or a quick scroll past a news item. No, it was a crisp, cream-colored card, delivered by hand to his quaint Victorian home on the outskirts of Havenwood, the kind of personal touch reserved for only the most significant of losses. Elias had found it tucked under his antique doorknob, an unusual sight given the automated efficiency of modern mail. The name on the card, etched in elegant, flowing script, had made his blood run cold. Eleanor Vance. He'd stood there in the morning light, the dew still clinging to the hydrangeas, the card trembling slightly in his hand. Eleanor Vance. It was impossible. Eleanor Vance was dead. She had been dead for over a decade. He knew because he had been there. He had mourned her. He had carried her coffin. He had delivered the eulogy, his voice cracking with a grief so profound it had threatened to shatter him. Eleanor Vance, the love of his life, his radiant Eleanor, with eyes the color of a stormy sea and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. They had met in college, two aspiring historians drawn together by a shared passion for forgotten stories and ancient civilizations. Their love story wasn't one of fiery passion and grand gestures. It was a slow, tender bloom, rooted in mutual respect, quiet understanding, and an unspoken promise of forever. They had built a life together, a home filled with books, old maps, and the quiet hum of shared dreams. Their future had stretched out before them, a tapestry of shared adventures and peaceful domesticity. Then the accident. A rainy night, a slick road, a drunk driver, a tragedy so sudden, so brutal, it had ripped the fabric of Elias's existence to shreds. He remembered the funeral like it was yesterday, a blur of tear-stained faces, hushed whispers, and the suffocating scent of lilies. He remembered the empty ache in his chest that had never truly healed. He had spent years picking up the pieces, trying to rebuild a life that felt irrevocably broken. And now this card, an obituary, for Eleanor Vance, dated just last week. His initial reaction was a cold, creeping dread. Was this some cruel joke? Some macabre prank designed to reopen old wounds? He turned the card over, expecting to find a taunting message, a clue to the perpetrator of this sick charade. But there was nothing but the stark, formal language of a legitimate death notice. It listed the date of birth, the date of death, a brief mention of her loving spirit, and contributions to the Historical Society. Contributions to the Historical Society? Eleanor had indeed been a passionate member, even serving as its president for a time. But that was before the accident, before her death. Elias's historian's mind, accustomed to dissecting anomalies, immediately began to search for explanations. Misprint? A different Eleanor Vance? He knew Havenwood was a small town, but not so small that it couldn't have multiple people with the same name. Yet, the details, particularly the mention of the Historical Society, gnawed at him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling as he navigated to the local online obituaries. He typed in Eleanor Vance, and there it was. Not one, but two. One from 10 years ago, brief and heartbreaking, confirming the tragic accident. And another, a more recent one, with the same elegant script, the same details. It listed her age as 42, exactly what Eleanor would be now. It included a photograph that, despite a decade of absence and the subtle cruelties of time, was undeniably, Unmistakably, his Eleanor. A wave of nausea washed over Elias. This wasn't a mistake. This was something far more sinister. He zoomed in on the photo. Her eyes, still the stormy sea, held a wisdom he hadn't seen before, a subtle haunted quality. Her smile was fainter, a ghost of the radiant joy he remembered. But it was her, and she was smiling. In an obituary, dated last week, he felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. What kind of nightmare was this? Was he losing his mind? Had grief finally twisted his perception of reality into something grotesque? He remembered the funeral with agonizing clarity. The closed casket, the official reports confirming her identity, the grief-stricken faces of her parents, now long past themselves. Everything pointed to her death. Yet here she was apparently dying again. He clutched the card, his knuckles white. There was a desperate, illogical hope blossoming in his chest, warring with an even stronger sense of terror. What if she wasn't dead then? What if she was alive? And if she was, why had he been made to believe she was gone? Who would orchestrate such a cruel deception? And why? The thought propelled him out of his house and into his car, the engine roaring to life with a primal urgency. He had to go to the funeral home, the one listed on the recent obituary. It was a new establishment in Havenwood, built just a few years ago, not the one that had handled Eleanor's first agonizing service. As he drove, the familiar streets of Havenwood seemed to twist into something alien, menacing. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every familiar house seemed to watch him with silent judgment. His mind raced, replaying every moment of their life together, every memory of her supposed death. Had there been any inconsistencies? Any lingering doubts he had pushed aside in his grief? He remembered the strange reluctance of the funeral director to allow him to see her one last time, citing the extensive nature of the injuries. He had dismissed it then, attributing it to their well-meaning attempt to spare him further pain. Now it felt like a deliberate act of concealment. The funeral home, Evergreen Rest, was a modern building of polished granite and dark wood, a stark contrast to the old, brick-faced establishment he remembered. A subtle chill seemed to emanate from its very walls. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and sorrow, a scent that always transported Elias back to that unbearable day. A young woman with sympathetic eyes greeted him from behind a large, mahogany desk. Her name tag read Sarah. "Good afternoon," she said softly, her voice a hushed whisper. "How can I help you?" Elias swallowed hard, his voice raspy. "I'm here about Eleanor Vance. The obituary. I knew her." Sarah's sympathetic expression deepened. "I'm so sorry for your loss, sir. Eleanor was a truly remarkable woman." "Remarkable, yes," Elias muttered, his gaze sweeping the quiet lobby, searching for any sign, any clue. "But there's been a mistake, a terrible mistake." Sarah frowned, a hint of confusion clouding her eyes. "A mistake, sir? I assure you, all our records are meticulously kept." "No, not in your records," Elias insisted, his voice rising slightly, betraying the tremor of panic just beneath his composed exterior. "The person in that obituary, Eleanor Vance. She died 10 years ago. I was at her funeral. I buried her." Sarah's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing her professional sympathy. "Sir, I think you might be mistaken. Eleanor Vance passed away just last week. Her service was quite recent." She gestured vaguely towards a wreath of flowers near a closed door. "We've just concluded her memorial." Elias felt his world tilt on its axis. "You just concluded her memorial? You mean she's gone again? But she was here? Alive?" The words tumbled out, incoherent, desperate. Sarah looked genuinely distressed, perhaps thinking he was a grieving man unhinged by sorrow. "Sir, I understand this is a difficult time, but Eleanor Vance was a client here for several months. She was terminally ill. We arranged everything according to her wishes." "Terminally ill? Eleanor? For months?" The information hit Elias like a physical blow. This wasn't some doppelganger. This wasn't a cruel joke. This was Eleanor. His Eleanor. And she had been alive. For 10 years. Living in Havenwood. Perhaps. Suffering from a terminal illness. And he, her husband, had been mourning a ghost, living a lie while she was still breathing, still existing. The implications were staggering, terrifying. Why had she faked her death? Why had she vanished from his life without a trace, only to reappear in an obituary? What kind of dark secret could have driven her to such an extreme act? The answers, he knew with a chilling certainty, lay beyond the comforting veil of his known reality. And he was about to rip that veil apart. The scent of lilies, once a symbol of his enduring grief, now seemed to mock Elias, clinging to his clothes and invading his senses. He stumbled out of evergreen rest, the polite but bewildered expressions of the funeral home staff burning into his mind. They clearly thought he was deranged, a man clinging to delusions. But Elias knew, with an unshakable certainty that vibrated through his bones, that he was saner than he'd ever been. The world around him, however, was not. It was a lie, a carefully constructed facade, and he was finally seeing the cracks. His first thought, desperate and frantic, was to find proof. Proof that Eleanor was alive, that this wasn't some elaborate psychological breakdown. He drove to the Havenwood Public Records Office, a squat, brick building that held the town's documented history. He needed birth certificates, marriage licenses, death certificates, anything that could unravel this monstrous knot of deception. The clerk, a portly man named Mr. Henderson who had known Elias for years, greeted him with a nod. "Elias, good to see you. What brings you to the hallowed halls of bureaucracy today?" Mr. Henderson chuckled, oblivious to the storm brewing within Elias. "Mr. Henderson, I need to see some records. Specifically, the death certificate for Eleanor Vance, dated about 10 years ago. And any recent records for an Eleanor Vance." Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. Eleanor Vance? The Historical Society president? Dreadful shame about her passing, just last week. A lovely woman. And the one from 10 years back, terrible accident that was. "Yes, both of them," Elias stated, his voice tight. "I need to see the originals." Mr. Henderson, though a bit puzzled by Elias's intensity, retrieved the files. First, the one from 10 years ago. Elias stared at it, his heart pounding. Date of death, October 12th. Cause of death, severe blunt force trauma, vehicular accident. Attending physician, Dr. Arthur Finch. Elias remembered Dr. Finch, a kindly old doctor who had retired years ago. The signature was there, clear and official. It was all there, confirming the tragedy he had lived through. Then Mr. Henderson placed another file on the counter. The recent one. Elias's breath hitched. Date of death, July 20th, just a few days ago. Cause of death, complications from a prolonged illness. Attending physician, Dr. Evelyn Reed. This was a new name, a doctor Elias didn't know. And the signature, while official, seemed to have a slight flourish, almost artistic, compared to Dr. Finch's more staid handwriting. He noticed something else. Both certificates listed the same social security number, the same date of birth, the same parents. It was unequivocally the same Eleanor Vance. But how could one person have two death certificates 10 years apart with different causes of death and different doctors? This defied every logical principle. "Mr. Henderson," Elias began, his voice barely a whisper. This is impossible. How can the same person have two death certificates?" Mr. Henderson peered at the documents, his brow furrowed. "Well, that's highly unusual, Elias. I've never seen anything like it. Are you sure these are for the same person?" "Positive. Look at the details. They match perfectly except for the date and cause of death. And the attending physician." Elias pointed to the discrepancies. "This is fraudulent, or something far worse." Mr. Henderson, a man who prided himself on the immaculate order of his records, looked genuinely disturbed. I don't know what to say. These are official documents. They've been filed correctly." He looked from one certificate to the other, then back at Elias, a new glint of concern in his eyes. Perhaps you should speak to the police, Elias. The police. The thought had occurred to him, but a deeper, more primal instinct had urged caution. If this was a conspiracy, a deception of this magnitude, who could he trust? The idea of walking into a police station and explaining that his dead wife had died again felt like a fast track to a psychiatric evaluation. He needed more. He needed answers that only Eleanor could provide. And if she was truly gone this time, someone had to know the truth of her decade-long disappearance. He left the records office, the 2 death certificates haunting him like specters. He had to go to her house. Not his house, their house, the one they had shared before. No, the house listed on the recent obituary. The one on Whisperwood Lane. He knew Havenwood was small, but he hadn't paid much attention to the new developments, the new residents. He drove, his mind a whirlwind of fragmented memories and terrifying possibilities. The house on Whisperwood Lane was grander than he'd imagined. A modern architectural marvel tucked away amidst a stand of old oaks. It was sleek, minimalist, and utterly devoid of the warmth that characterized Eleanor's taste. This wasn't her house. Couldn't be. But the obituary said it was her residence. A nameplate by the door read Vance. Just Vance. Not Eleanor Vance. A tiny detail, but it screamed at him. Who else lived here? As he approached the front door, he noticed a faint light emanating from one of the windows. Someone was home. His heart hammered against his ribs. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What would he say? Excuse me. I'm here because my supposedly dead wife just died again, and her obituary says she lived here. It sounded insane. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He had to be calm, rational, like the historian he was. He knocked. The sound echoed in the sudden silence. After a moment, the door opened. A man stood there, tall and imposing, with an air of quiet authority. He had silvering temples, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a formal, almost unreadable expression. He looked to be in his late 50s, well-dressed, clearly a man of means. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice deep and measured, polite but with an underlying current that suggested he was not to be trifled with. Elias cleared his throat. "My name is Elias Thorne. I'm here about Eleanor Vance." The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "And what is your connection to Eleanor?" "I was her husband," Elias stated, the words feeling foreign and heavy on his tongue. "Her first husband. I buried her 10 years ago." A muscle twitched in the man's jaw. He didn't seem surprised, but rather resigned, as if this was a conversation he had anticipated, or perhaps dreaded. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please, come in, Mr. Thorne. My name is Arthur Vance. Eleanor was my wife." Arthur Vance. The name resonated with a strange, unsettling familiarity. Elias stepped inside, his eyes scanning the elegant, sterile interior. No books, no maps, no vibrant colors. This was not the Eleanor he knew. "My wife, your wife, was alive all this time?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. Arthur sighed, a weary sound. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. She was." He led Elias into a spacious, minimalist living room, gesturing to a sleek leather sofa. "Please sit." Elias remained standing, his gaze fixed on Arthur. "Why? Why was I told she was dead? Why was I made to mourn her for a decade?" His voice was rising now, betraying the raw hurt and confusion bubbling to the surface. Arthur steepled his fingers, his eyes unblinking. "It was her choice, Mr. Thorne. A very difficult choice born out of necessity." "Necessity?" Elias scoffed. What kind of necessity would lead a woman to fake her own death and abandon her husband? Arthur paused, considering his words carefully. "Eleanor had secrets, Mr. Thorne. Secrets that threatened to consume her. Secrets that, if revealed, would have put both her and everyone she cared about in grave danger. She believed that disappearing, effectively dying to her old life, was the only way to protect you." "Protect me?" Elias felt a bitter laugh escape him. Protect me from what? A decade of unbearable grief? A life lived in a shadow of loss. Arthur's gaze softened slightly, a hint of something akin to pity in his eyes. She truly believed it was the only way, Elias. She never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. The words struck Elias like a physical blow. Eleanor loved him, but she had abandoned him, left him for dead. This story, this impossible narrative, was twisting his very perception of reality. What kind of secrets are you talking about, Mr. Vance? What was so dangerous that she had to erase herself from existence? Arthur stood up, walked to a large window overlooking a meticulously manicured garden, and stared out. His back was to Elias, his voice almost a whisper. Eleanor. She was involved in something long before she met you, something that she tried to escape, but it followed her. An organization, powerful, ruthless, and they wanted something from her. Something she possessed, something she had stumbled upon by accident. An organization. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine. This was moving beyond personal tragedy into the realm of espionage or something even darker. What did she possess? What was it? Arthur turned back, his face grim. Information, Mr. Thorne. Information that could dismantle powerful structures. Information that certain people would kill to keep buried. Eleanor was a brilliant historian, as you know. She had a knack for uncovering forgotten truths. Unfortunately, she unearthed a truth that was never meant to see the light of day. And when she did, her life, as she knew it, ceased to exist. He looked at Elias, his expression grave. And now that same danger, it's back. And it seems to have found her again, even after all these years. The implication hung heavy in the air. Eleanor, alive all these years, hiding from a mysterious, ruthless organization. And now she was truly dead. Had they finally caught up to her? Had they silenced her? The thought sent a jolt of ice through Elias's veins. He had walked into a world far more complex and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. His search for answers had just begun, and it was clear, with chilling certainty, that the answers were steeped in blood and betrayal. The revelation hung in the air, a poisonous fog settling over Elias. An organization, information, danger. It was a narrative plucked straight from a spy novel, yet it was terrifyingly real, rooted in the very fabric of his shattered life. Arthur Vance, seemingly composed, watched Elias with an almost clinical detachment, as if observing a chemical reaction. Elias, however, felt like the subject of the experiment, dissolving into a maelstrom of confusion and rage. What information? Elias demanded, his voice hoarse, the rational historian in him struggling to piece together this impossible puzzle. What did she find that was so important, so dangerous, that she had to disappear? Arthur walked over to a polished mahogany desk, picked up a small, intricately carved wooden box, and placed it on the coffee table between them. Eleanor was researching an obscure, forgotten network of secret societies that operated in the early 20th century. Most historians dismissed them as fringe groups, but Eleanor believed there was something more. She found evidence of their involvement in historical events that were publicly attributed to other causes: economic collapses, political assassinations, even some seemingly natural disasters. Elias frowned. Conspiracy theories? My Eleanor wouldn't dabble in such things. Not theories, Mr. Thorne, Arthur corrected, his voice firm. Facts. She uncovered a vast web of influence, a shadow government, if you will, that has been manipulating global events for over a century. They call themselves the Obsidian Hand. The name sent a shiver down Elias's spine. It sounded theatrical, almost fictional. Yet Arthur's gravitas lent it in chilling authenticity. And what did Eleanor find that made her a target? Arthur opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a tarnished silver locket, an antique compass, and a small, leather-bound journal. He picked up the journal. This is what she found. It's a coded diary, belonging to one of the founding members of the Obsidian Hand. Eleanor spent years deciphering it. It contained a list of names, locations, and details of their operations. Proof. irrefutable proof of their existence and their crimes. Elias stared at the journal, a sense of awe and terror washing over him. And she was supposed to die in that car crash? That wasn't an accident. Arthur nodded slowly. Precisely. It was orchestrated. A message. She was close to exposing them. But Eleanor, being Eleanor, was always one step ahead. She had anticipated their move. She had a contingency plan, a new identity, a new life, and I helped her execute it. You, Elias felt a surge of betrayal. You were involved in deceiving me? In letting me believe my wife was dead? It wasn't deception, Mr. Thorne. It was a necessary act of survival, Arthur retorted, his voice hardening slightly. Eleanor sought me out. I work as a consultant for individuals in extreme peril. I have the resources, the network, to make people disappear. She came to me with the journal, terrified, but also determined to protect the truth. She insisted that you, her beloved husband, must be kept safe at all costs. She knew if they found out you were her connection, you'd be next. She made me promise to never reveal the truth to you. Until now. Until now. Elias echoed, a sickening realization dawning on him. Why now? Arthur's gaze became distant, filled with a profound sadness. Because they found her. Even after all these years, they never stopped looking. They finally traced her through a series of complex data trails. She had been ill for some time, a rare, aggressive form of cancer. She knew her time was short, but she also knew that the Obsidian Hand would redouble their efforts to retrieve the journal once she was gone. So she made arrangements. She reached out to me, months ago, and instructed me to find someone she could trust, to continue her work, to finally expose them. And who is that someone? Elias asked, his voice barely audible, a chilling suspicion forming in his mind. Arthur looked directly at him, his eyes holding an intensity that made Elias's stomach clench. You, Mr. Thorne. It's you. The words hit Elias like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of him. Him? A mild-mannered historian? Confronting a global conspiracy? It was absurd. It was impossible. He shook his head, denial warring with a terrifying sense of inevitability. No, I can't. I'm not equipped for this. Eleanor believed you were, Arthur stated, his voice unwavering. She said your meticulous mind, your dedication to truth, your ability to connect disparate facts. These were the very qualities needed. She entrusted this journal to you, through me. Contains the truth. Contains their downfall. Elias looked at the leather-bound journal, then back at Arthur. So, her death last week, was it natural? Or did they? Arthur's jaw tightened. Her illness was real, tragically so, but the Obsidian Hand still wanted the journal. They sent operatives. They interrogated her. In her final days, she endured unimaginable suffering, trying to protect this information, to keep it safe for you. She died resisting them, protecting the truth. Her death certificate, the cause of death, it's a cover-up for the final, brutal confrontation she endured. Elias felt a surge of hot tears sting his eyes, a grief far deeper and more complex than the one he had carried for a decade. Eleanor hadn't just died. She had died fighting, a warrior protecting a secret, protecting him. All this time, he had mourned a ghost, while she had been living a life of perilous secrecy, carrying a burden that would have crushed most people. There's more, Arthur continued, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. The Obsidian Hand knows you were Eleanor's husband. They know about your connection. They suspect you might be the recipient of this information. They are already watching you. That obituary was a test, a way to gauge your reaction, to see if you would stir. Elias's blood ran cold. The personalized card, the online notice, it wasn't a mistake, it was a trap. He had walked right into it. So, they know I'm looking. They do, Arthur confirmed grimly. And they will not stop until they have that journal, and until you are silenced. You are now in grave danger, Mr. Thorne. Just as Eleanor was. You have a choice. You can try to live your life as if none of this happened, hand over the journal, and hope they leave you alone. Or you can fulfill Eleanor's final wish. You can expose them. You can bring down the obsidian hand. Elias looked at the journal, his hand hovering over it. The weight of Eleanor's sacrifice, her unwavering belief in him, settled upon his shoulders. He was a historian, a seeker of truth. And here, in his hands, was the ultimate truth. A truth that had cost the love of his life everything. There was no going back. His old life, his quiet, predictable existence, was gone. It had been shattered the moment he saw that obituary. He knew, with a certainty that transcended fear, what he had to do. The game had begun, and he was Eleanor's last, desperate hope. The silence that followed Arthur's revelation was heavy, pregnant with the weight of an impossible choice. Elias felt a profound shift within him, a quiet resolve hardening his historian's heart into something far more resilient. The quiet life he had meticulously rebuilt, brick by painful brick, lay in ruins. But in its place, a new purpose emerged, forged in grief and fueled by an incandescent fury. He picked up the leather-bound journal, its worn cover feeling strangely familiar, as if it had always been destined for his hands. "Tell me everything, Arthur," Elias said, his voice steady, devoid of the tremor that had plagued him for days. "Everything you know about the obsidian hand. Everything Eleanor found. Every detail that can help me bring them down." Arthur nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "I knew she chose well, very well." He spent the next few hours meticulously outlining the scope of the obsidian hand's influence, their shadowy hierarchy, their methods of operation, and the key figures Eleanor had identified. He spoke of their vast financial resources, their infiltration of governments and corporations, their ruthless efficiency in eliminating threats. It was a terrifying tapestry of power and corruption, a hidden empire woven into the fabric of global society. Elias listened, his mind absorbing every detail, connecting the dots, his historian's intuition whirring into overdrive. He learned that the obsidian hand wasn't just about money or power. It was about control. Control over information, over resources, over the very narrative of history. They sought to shape the world to their own design, erasing any inconvenient truths. Eleanor's journal, with its meticulous dates, names, and locations, was the key to dismantling their carefully constructed facade. "The journal is coded, as I mentioned," Arthur explained, pointing to a series of symbols and cryptic phrases on one of the pages. Eleanor developed a new cipher for it, knowing they would eventually try to retrieve it. Only someone with an intimate knowledge of her work, her thought patterns, and her subtle historical references could possibly decipher it. "And that's me," Elias finished, a grim smile touching his lips. It was a challenge, a final intellectual dance with the woman he loved. A way to honor her legacy. He knew Eleanor, knew the intricate workings of her brilliant mind, her love for obscure historical puzzles. This was a test, and he would not fail her. Arthur then gave him a small, encrypted device no larger than a credit card. "This contains a secure communication line, untraceable by the obsidian hand, and a list of trusted contacts, individuals who, like me, have been working quietly against this organization. They are scattered across the globe, but they share Eleanor's vision for a world free from this shadow. Use it wisely. They will come for you, Elias. They will use every trick, every threat. They will try to break you, but you are not alone." The next few weeks were a blur of intense work and chilling paranoia. Elias immersed himself in Eleanor's journal, his historical expertise proving invaluable in cracking the complex cipher. He spent sleepless nights poring over the cryptic entries, slowly unearthing the chilling truths Eleanor had painstakingly documented. He discovered names of senators, CEOs, military generals, even revered academics, all secretly beholden to the obsidian hand. He found evidence of assassinations disguised as accidents, economic crashes engineered for profit, and wars fueled by manufactured grievances. It was a grotesque betrayal of humanity, a testament to the insatiable hunger for power. He communicated sparingly with Arthur and the network of contacts, sharing his progress, receiving warnings and advice. He learned to look over his shoulder, to vary his routine, to trust no one outside their small, desperate circle. He felt the invisible threads of the obsidian hand tightening around him, a constant, suffocating presence. There were subtle signs. Strange cars parked outside his house, hang-up calls, anonymous emails with veiled threats. They were testing him, probing his defenses. The climax came swiftly, brutally. Elias was nearing the end of the journal's decryption, a final, crucial set of coordinates for a hidden data server containing all of the Obsidian Hand's operations. He was working late one night, the air thick with the smell of old paper and nervous energy, when his front door splintered inwards with a deafening crash. 3 figures, dressed in black, their faces obscured by balaclavas, stormed into his home. They moved with a chilling efficiency, clearly trained. Elias, anticipating this moment, had prepared. He had moved the journal and the encrypted device to a hidden compartment beneath his antique desk, a secret he and Eleanor had devised years ago for their historical treasures. "Where is it, Thorne?" One of the figures snarled, his voice distorted by a voice modulator. "The journal. We know Eleanor gave it to you." Elias stood his ground, a fragile shield against overwhelming force. "I don't know what you're talking about." They began to ransack his home, tearing through his beloved books, smashing furniture, their frustration mounting with every passing second. Elias knew they would eventually find it, but he needed time. Time for Arthur and his network to be alerted, time for him to buy a moment of clarity. As one of them lunged at him, Elias, fueled by a surge of desperate adrenaline and Eleanor's unwavering spirit, fought back. He was a historian, not a fighter, but the raw instinct for survival and the burning desire to protect Eleanor's legacy propelled him. He landed a desperate blow, creating a small window of opportunity. He darted towards his back door, triggering a silent alarm on the encrypted device as he fled into the night. He ran through the familiar streets of Havenwood, now transformed into a treacherous labyrinth, the shouts of his pursuers echoing behind him. He heard sirens in the distance, a faint but hopeful sound. Arthur had alerted local authorities, subtly diverting them with a tip about a break-in at a high-value residence. It wouldn't stop the Obsidian Hand, but it would buy Elias precious time. He led them on a desperate chase through the moonlit streets, ducking into alleyways, scaling fences, his lungs burning, his body aching. Just as he thought they were closing in, a dark sedan screeched to a halt beside him. The back door flew open. "Get in, Elias!" Arthur's voice, calm and urgent, cut through the night. Elias scrambled inside, collapsing into the back seat as the car sped away, leaving his ransacked home and the frustrated operatives behind. Arthur was driving, his face grim. "They're ruthless," Arthur stated, his eyes on the road. "But you bought us time, and you've confirmed their worst fears. You have the journal, and you're decrypting it. This puts us on an even footing. Now we move to the next phase." The next phase involved a desperate race against time. Elias, with Arthur's help, used the encrypted contacts to leak portions of the journal's contents to independent journalists and whistleblowers across the globe. They didn't release everything at once. It was a carefully orchestrated drip feed, designed to sow chaos and distrust within the Obsidian Hand, to expose their tentacles one by one, without revealing the full extent of the journal's secrets prematurely. The initial revelations sent shockwaves through the political and economic elite. High-ranking officials were suddenly under investigation, corporations faced unprecedented scrutiny, and long-held narratives of history began to unravel. The Obsidian Hand, accustomed to operating in the shadows, found itself exposed, its meticulously crafted facade crumbling under the weight of documented truth. But the Obsidian Hand fought back with vicious determination. Disinformation campaigns flooded the media, attempting to discredit Elias and the leaked information. Threats escalated, and several of Arthur's contacts went silent, victims of the organization's brutal retaliation. The war was far from over, but for the first time in over a century, the Obsidian Hand was bleeding. Elias, no longer just a historian, but a reluctant warrior, understood that Eleanor's sacrifice had not been in vain. Her life, her hidden decade, her final moments of defiance, they had all converged into this singular, desperate chance for truth. The journal, now fully decrypted, was a beacon of light in a world shrouded in darkness. The story of Eleanor Vance, the woman who had died twice, became a whispered legend in their small, underground network. Her first death had been a strategic retreat, a desperate act of self-preservation. Her second, true death, was a defiant sacrifice, a final act of courage that had ignited a revolution of truth. Elias knew that his life would never be normal again. He was now inextricably linked to this battle, a guardian of Eleanor's legacy, a living testament to her unwavering belief in justice. The Obsidian Hand was severely wounded, its core operations disrupted, its network fractured. But it was not entirely destroyed. Its tendrils still stretched, though weakened, through the global fabric. The battle for truth would continue, fought by individuals like Elias, fueled by the memory of a woman who chose to die to live, and then died again to free the truth. And so, my friends, the tale of Eleanor Vance, a woman who danced with death not once, but twice, comes to its poignant, haunting conclusion. It's a story that reminds us that some truths are too dangerous to remain hidden, and some loves are too strong to be broken by even the most elaborate deceptions. Her spirit, her unwavering courage, lives on in the revelations she unearthed, in the quiet rebellion she sparked. It's a testament to the fact that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, a single spark of truth can ignite a fire that burns brighter than any shadow. If this journey into the heart of a profound mystery and a desperate fight for truth has captivated you, if Eleanor's story has resonated with your own yearning for justice, please consider liking this video. Your support helps us bring more untold stories to light. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the shadows of the unknown. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone brave enough to see them.